I'm Joe Mullings. I'm in Los Angeles, Anaheim in fact, at the MDM Conference 2020, and I'm super happy to be here. I'm the CEO of the Mullings Group and founder and CEO of Dragonfly Stories, our storytelling production company.
Great, Joe, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate this. You and I met a year ago at this very conference. You kindly gave me some guidance, some advice about starting a podcast. And now here we are, you're a guest on our podcast, so good for you.
And I have to tell you, when I got the email from you, the request from you to do this, and you told me that you pulled the trigger and quit corporate, and you told me that you're building your company and you started a podcast, I couldn't fucking say yes fast enough. Because you know how many questions and requests I get, and you know, what should I do and how should I do it, and invariably very few people follow through, so bravo for you.
Well, that's because I got Micah here who pushes me over the ledge. He won't let me not do it, so there we are. But we're here specifically, and we're at MDM West, a big manufacturing conference for, you know, all of medical, but obviously our show's focused on Ortho, and with your, you know, what you're doing with Dragonfly, and then what also you've been doing with the Mullings Group, there's been a lot of storytelling on LinkedIn and other media now, we're hearing from you, on specifically AI and robotics. Now we've talked to a lot of surgeons in the last few months. I mean, 5 or 6, Micah, we've done interviews about robotics.
Yeah,
right?
It's a hot topic.
It's a really hot topic. They're not all yet embracing, but we've never covered AI. And what I wanted to ask you about is, orthopedics is a little bit more stoic. I don't know if that's the right word.
Provincial.
Right, than say cardiology and other sexier areas of medical device. Where do you see AI and robotics fitting into orthopedics, and is it going to be this groundbreaking? Is it going to be as prevalent as in the other areas?
So, you know, AI is a pretty broad term. AI, as it applies to, are we talking about surgical intelligence intraoperatively? Are we giving guidance to the surgeon in the middle of an operation? Maybe. But what you do need for AI is you need imaging, for the most part. Without imaging, you really have a limited capability of AI. So I believe that you're going to have the highest adoption rates of AI in medtech, where you have the heaviest amount of imaging, pre-op imaging. Because now what we can do is, with the capability of software, algorithms, and deep learning, we can look at images and see what the normal eye can't see, and then start to aggregate that against massive data sets, and then offer insights surgically. So I would say the question is, how much imaging takes place in ortho, and how much of that imaging requires intelligence or predictions that help that surgeon make decisions intraoperatively. So I toss that back, and it's probably near the middle to the back of the line in relative terms to pulmonology or neurology or, you know, interventional cardiology.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair answer, except that, you know, imaging does, I mean, it plays a huge role in preoperative planning for an orthopedic surgeon, right? So they're definitely use that to decide what their options are and what equipment they're going to use. So I think probably that's going to come down, in what you're saying, it's going to come down to how the med device companies decide to apply it to some kind of pre-op planning.
Pre-op planning, but also, if you think about it respectfully, ortho's carpentry. It's carpentry. And there's not a huge challenge with diagnostics in ortho, because they're hard surfaces, they're pretty easy to image, and once the doc gets in there, the surgeon gets in there, he or she has a ton of options to treat. Yeah? And oftentimes, I think the real question comes around is, imaging affects ortho, especially in the 3D printing world. I think that is an under-discussed area in ortho. But staying on AI, because I want to keep on the theme here, I think AI will help with planning and product development with retrospective as well as prospective data.
Does it go hand in hand with the robotics? I mean, is that the future maybe in ortho? Because robotics is starting to take hold for sure, which just gives, you know, consistent, replicable results in hip and knee surgery. Yep. And takes that, you're right, there's some carpentry and there's a little bit of rule of thumb in there traditionally, right? And then cutting jigs and then now robotics. Is it AI married to robotics?
No, I think they're independent of each other. They happen to harmonize with each other, but you can totally have robotics without AI. I don't think they're necessarily interrelated. They certainly, again, amplify each other's capabilities when used appropriately. But surgical robotics has the highest adoption rate in orthopedics, more than any other vertical so far to date in medtech. And that's because it's the easiest. In my opinion, it's a here, hold this technology in ortho. Meaning that on a spinal side or a hip side of things, basically it can hold the driver, the shaver, and the whatever your end effector is more effectively than a human hand, and I can eliminate people out of the workflow.
So there's been, as well as the positive news about robotics, there's been a lot of negative news. But moving on to AI, how successful has AI been so far in your arena, and what negatives are there, if any?
So I think AI is still in its infancy, and if we want to stay on ortho, it really hasn't gotten much traction there yet because there's not a sore point on diagnostics in ortho. If you think about it, it's an X-ray for the most part, and we'll go in and do a soft tissue imaging dependent, and then we'll go ahead and do the surgery. And once I open you up, or if I do a lateral and I go in, where I think robotics, the biggest part of robotics is there's a company out there called Integrity Implants. Put them on your radar screen. They've got a very interesting lift system. I think it's called the Flarehawk, whatever it's called. Is that what it is, Icky? And Flarehawk, yeah. And it's a very interesting lift, and placement of that is based upon disc prep, and also the ability to get this very small stent-like lift into the area and then allow it to get a larger footprint and also add height. But disc prep on that is critical in order to set that up. You can't prep properly in a classic manual surgical procedure. But if you can take a robot like Exact Robotics or like Oris, where you can snake a very small, thin, snake-like device with an end effector that can prep a disc, and then that's where I think robotics starts to grow in the area, and AI can come in. But I think it's all pro, especially in ortho.
Yeah. You breezed over something there, mate. Like, what's these negative? You said, and there's some negative results, but leaving that aside, let's move on.
Well, on robotics, there's been, and most notably for the public, is the Netflix series on I can't remember the name of it.
Bleeding Edge.
Bleeding Edge.
The Bleeding Edge,
where they talk about
shavings of the intuitive device.
I guess the disappointment of robotics and the lack of training surgeons are possibly getting, and so on.
Look, it's a brand new technology. When we started the combustion engine in the car, there were a lot of people killed. There was cars stuck in mud, and people said, well, the horse is still better. Accelerate that couple decades downrange, and we just became better because we had more intelligent, smart people improving the use of the device appropriately. Right now, I liken robotics to early stage adolescence, and your first time with a person of the opposite sex. You pull on this, you poke at that, you bite this, and you hope something works, right?
I have no idea what you're talking about, Joe.
You just don't want to be that person's first time.
Right, and so Bleeding Edge is a hit piece. Certainly somebody's got to stand guard, but it's a brand new technology, and they're courageous pioneers, and now we have evangelists. And surgical robotics today is tremendously better and less expensive than it was 3 years ago, and I think we're going to continue. And it's a compounding of leveraging technology in the digital landscape versus staying in the analog surgical world where there's one surgery, one outcome, and really nobody has access to that information, data, outcome. And robotics allows us to broaden the outcomes impact to the patient, right? And then we can give guidance. This surgeon did this, or these 400 peers of yours did this in a surgery. And at this point during the surgery, based upon the data you've given us on this surgeon, on this patient, we're going to recommend via artificial intelligence this be done next, because based upon outcomes downrange, your peers did this. So that's where I think in orthopedics, especially spine, you're going to be able to take that retrospective, prospective data, put it in, and give guidance to the surgeon. Now, there's the top 1%ers that might not need that, but how about the fellows who are just coming out and the first 3, 5, 10-year surgeons? Why would you not empower them to take the learnings of their superiors and peers and give them guidance in surgery? They can wave it off, just like a sign on third base. They can wave it off. But based upon pure outcomes and data, that's a very powerful use of AI in orthopedics.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And actually, we recently interviewed a surgeon, Jason Snibby, who echoed pretty much all of those remarks and felt so strongly. You said there's evangelists for this technology. I would say, he's probably one of those. So much so that he would cancel the surgery if his robot is not available. And that's today. He wouldn't go back to traditional way of doing the surgery.
There's definitely that old guard who think they have it all sorted and can do it just, with their thumb. But like you say, that's a great piece of advice for the young surgeons up and coming, because they definitely haven't got there yet.
They can't. There's no way you can accelerate experience, right, in a linear fashion. But with the use of robotics and AI, you can accelerate experience because you're taking your cohorts and your peers' experience and then delivering it to them based upon the scenario you're in right now. If you're 2 years out, and you just started your practice, you can get advisement, right? So look at robotics with the 3 A's. You've got the augmentation of the surgeon's ability. Then the next generation of robotics is advisement, intraoperative advisement in the middle of the moment, and eventually we may see autonomous. And so we're going to sit in that sort of augmentation as well as advisement for a long time. I don't believe in the next 20, 30 years you're going to have an autonomous robot in orthopedics, at least.
So let's switch gears for a second. Sure. We're here at MDM West, and there's a lot at this conference about 3D printing, and you brought up 3D and its applications to ortho. Now I'm starting to see more and more of this. There's definitely some companies starting to dabble into the 3D printing for knee and hip, into arthroplasty in particular. What are you seeing there that's exciting, and how rapidly is that revolution moving along?
I am so excited about this, probably more than any other aspect of orthopedics, and here's why. I'm going to be a futurist here for a moment. This is where you have the convergence of Amazon, you have the convergence of the surgeon, you have the convergence of 3D printing, and then you have the convergence of capitalist markets. Orthopedics, for the most part, have been designed for the US market for the 5'10" Caucasian man. And
Micah.
You're 6'1" athletic, and but they've been pretty much built for the white male American, and a lot of the implants don't work in an Asian market the same way. A lot of implants don't work where you have very clear geometry differences in the skeletal makeup. So here's my 5-year out. Dr. Smith's has a pre-op image of her patient. She takes that image, and then she sends that image to Amazon Health. Amazon Health has a farm of 3D printers. And via Titanium, because her surgery is tomorrow, she sends that image over to Amazon. Amazon prints that out on their 3D printer farm, Titanium, and ships it to, the ambulatory surgery center, because it's not a hospital anymore, because the economics of a hospital no longer make sense. Mm-hmm. Now we've got Amazon delivering a 3D printed medical device. We've just shortened that supply chain on the expense. We no longer have inventory in an ambulatory surgery center. That is a pain in the butt. And now that doctor, she gets her implant right there delivered the day of the surgery. The implant is custom for that patient, whether it's a hip or a knee or a shoulder or whatever it is. It pops in, and now we've got a bespoke experience at a much lower cost point to the 18.5% GDP of this country. And this is where I love where healthcare is going. And the capitalists will love this. Amazon is going to cannibalize a large part of the supply chain and the customization of the 3D printing as it applies to MedTech world.
I mean, mind-blowing stuff, right? Now, you got a much better handle on this, certainly than we do, but probably than a lot of people. Is it definitely that the future of this thing is in patient specific, right? Let me end that thought there. In your process that you just described, I first have to scan the patient and decide the exact size and come up with the patient specific model, right? And hopefully that fits and is correct every time. In our current scenario, we just have shelves with 18 different sizes and different modular options that you can put together and build the right one. Is 3D printing of just sized components, is that a complete no-no that then eliminates that first step? I don't need to go patient specific, I just need to size you with preoperative planning and say, send this one, and what really the 3D printer eliminates is the need to carry huge amounts of stock for a rep to come in with a big bag with all the different equipment that you can use that day. I mean, is that a possible future? Or?
It's a possibility, but you've got major issues. The regulatory and safety that goes with 3D printing is pretty severe. You can't just open a 3D printing shop down the block. There's all kinds of OSHA, and it's a very, from what I've been told, and actually been invited to a number of them, it's a literally explosive environment. So you can't just expect a hospital to have the ability to maintain and upkeep, the same way you don't want to develop your own cloud in medtech. I can't keep that thing up between cybersecurity, attacks, regulatory, FDA oversight, et cetera, Let me outsource that, because we've moved into a world of specialization. We're becoming more and more specialized in everything we do. So I think the idea is novel and romantic about having the 3D printer right there in the OR, but you run into a myriad of issues, from servicing capabilities, it going down, maintenance, employees, footprint,
obsolescence.
Yeah. Why would you not just pay to have somebody else manage it and be an expert at that is part of your supply chain and then gets it delivered there, especially in an ambulatory surgical center, which is where a large majority, as long as you're not an at-risk patient, of surgical procedures going to happen in this country at a minimum.
So Joe Mullings, we have an audience of about 2.5 billion surgeons, I think. We're something like that now.
Love it. What's up, Doc?
So yeah, you're talking to them all right now. What is your key message or key takeaway specific to orthos and the future of healthcare?
Oh gosh, so look, I think orthopedics has got a great opportunity to impact in a few ways and be the tail that wags the dog of medtech and surgery moving forward. So here's what they are. Continue to embrace appropriately the use of surgical robotics. It's not the answer to everything, but it certainly is something that is the leading edge of where medtech's going, i.e. the data, and the use of data and amplifying your experience for future generation decision making, number one. And number two is Ortho will be the first mover, in my opinion, that will jettison the classic use of scopes in surgery. Give me a minute to explain this. The cost of putting a scope into a patient right now is unbelievable. You've got issues, first of all, with cost. The scope costs X, but servicing, reprocessing, and sterilization is 2X of the cost of that scope on the cost of surgery. Plus the footprint. Plus also, all my orthopods know that you are not getting a new scope every time. You've got something that's either been hit, the sapphire's been blemished, you've got to have 2 scopes in there, and in order to keep us at that 1% infection rate, the amount of effort needed to make it 99% proper is insane, between footprint, maintenance, costs, redundancy, et cetera, et cetera. A chip on a tip scope is here, and it requires one and done. You're getting a new scope in your hand every time, and you're going to have interchangeable heads on it. Vision in surgery needs to be addressed and sort of pivoted away from the classic 50-year-old tech that has not changed much. They just keep on increasing the size of the hammer and get you to swallow the pill saying 8K is better than 4K and 4K is better than 1080. And you can't even tell the difference in your eye. And so when I can bring that cost of that component and service to a procedure down by anywhere from 3 to 5X, that's cost back to your surgery center, and it's also reducing the 18% GDP load we've got on this country. So I would say ortho guys and girls, change the world of imaging right now in all of surgery, just the same way you did it in orthopedics.
All right, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time.
My
Again,
pleasure.
second year in a row. I'll see you here next year.
I'll be here.
We'll be up to 3.5 billion orthopedic surgeon
Love
listeners.
Love it.
But yeah, thanks again. Have a good rest of the
You
show.
got it, man. Thanks.
Let's just keep it rolling, if that's cool with you, Micah. Joe, this is good stuff, mate. You know, I think what's kind of amazing about you is you've got, I don't know where you're finding the time to do it with all of this and the media and stuff, but you've got a handle on what's happening in each of these industries, right? So in cardiology, and is this just from doing the recruitment and having to learn about the company? Yeah, you sit down with the
Listen,
people.
I get to sit down with the CEOs of these amazing companies. So 70% of our book are emerging tech companies in medtech.
Right.
Ortho, neuro, robotics, whatever it is, you know. So I'm sitting with these large strategics who I understand where their sort of gaps and sore points are, but especially these emerging tech startups that are pushing the envelope. And I sit with the CEOs, and so what they do is they will tell me, you know, what's the problem in the market, why is their product appropriate for it, and what's the possible solution for it, and I sit and I help them architect their companies. And they know I've seen all these technologies, so they want information and understanding about what are they missing, because they've only seen 3 companies in their whole life.
Right.
And I've seen thousands.
And they're asking you though in terms of people, human resource.
No, technologies, what do you think?
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
So how come you've never started a device like? You
I'm too smart. I make much more. The same way, you know, back in the gold rush,
enough.
you didn't make any money digging the gold in 1849.
Right.
You made money on supplying the entire gold digging economy. So all I do is I have a search firm that does full-time employment. I have an interim search firm that offers the bridge to full. And then we started Dragonfly Stories, which is my full production company that is actually one of the most potent weapons media that we can afford to the medtech industry and the emerging tech startups. Because if nobody knows you're there, you don't exist. If nobody knows you're there, you can't raise money. And if your go-to market strategy is old school analog, picking up the call or going to a TCT conference and beg for money on a strategic who doesn't even know your name, is not going to remember it.
Yeah.
When you can have 100,000 sets of eyes on you a day like my platform, and millions.
That's your reach now?
Yeah, more than 100,000 sets of eyes from our organization
A day.
A day. M&A guys, startups, emerging tech, strategics. And so media is an incredible weapon for hiring, for fundraising, for awareness in the market on M&A, and then just getting your story out there and telling it day after day, week after week, month after month. And every other billion-dollar market does it, but medtech doesn't do it.
Yeah, we're always behind.
Did you start out with the idea I'm going to create a media company, or was it just some little thing you started and it kind of just grew?
Yeah, so the story goes, 5.5 years ago, Google and J&J started Verb Surgical, the big surgical robotic play. It was a multi-billion-dollar investment, and at that point there were 6 employees. Scott Hunnekens brought me in, and Scott said, hey, we've got to hire 300 plus people, and we want people from Tesla, you know, Intuitive Surgical, Facebook, etc. And I said, sure, let's do it. And he tricked me a little bit. He said, oh, by the way, we can't show the robot, and we can't let them down the hallway and show the engineering going on here at Google. You're still up for it? And I was like, sure, you know. And so I was like, how was I going to do that at scale? And old school recruiting is a one-to-one relationship. You pick up the phone once, you talk to a person once, you hang up the phone, and if you caught them on a good day, they might lean in. Well, that wasn't scalable. So I said, wait a second, everybody's living their life out loud on media. When you look at Facebook, you look at Instagram, and nobody's ever done it before on LinkedIn. And people viewed LinkedIn as primarily a job board and an electronic Rolodex. And I looked at it as an unbelievable sort of platform of media. So I hired 2 young, right out of college, videographers, and we had 2 little inexpensive Sony cameras, and we started telling the story about Verb Surgical. And we did it about the market, not the robot. We did it about the intention of the technology, not the actual system itself. We talked about the leadership, Dave Scott, Scott Hunnekens, and all these great leaders. And then we talked about the mission of the company is to democratize surgery. And that storytelling resonated with tens of thousands of people who then started to lean in and be like, I'm interested. Talk to me, here's my resume.
So you were just pumping that content out on LinkedIn only at that time?
LinkedIn only at that time. So it created an inbound business.
Like Joe Mullings branded or Verb Surgical branded?
No, it was both. So we branded it for Verb Surgical, but it was also Joe Mullings branded. And so what that does, if you're in business and you're in business, the ability to close an inbound lead is 10x of that of an outbound lead. So we created an inbound demand based upon the stories we told. And so, you know, I looked at that and I said, hold on a second. All of my friends in the marketplace who are building companies are doing it the old way, in an analog, outbound, bang your head against the wall fashion. So I said, let me show you what I did and just watch. And then you're all smart enough, you're much smarter than me, why don't we just apply that to your company? And it's been unbelievable since. You know, we now have clients coming in saying, we're not recruiting yet, but can you tell our story on your platform and help us build our platform? And then we're going to have to hire people. I'm like, sign me up. So that's how it started. And now we're a 9-person plus production company with more than, all in, probably more than 6,000 square foot of production capabilities.
Yeah.
You know, built-in podcast rooms, video studios, entire teams, post-production, and distribution.
Look, Joe, I want to make something really clear. So last year, when we sat down, you know, we had a good long conversation, probably half an hour, and you were giving me different advice, and you know, I really didn't know what we were going to, we kind of had this idea, we didn't know how to start, and I don't think I would have ever started. And I want to say sincerely that I mean, Micah will tell you, I came back from this meeting kind of bouncing off the walls, and I was like, mate, you know, you got to hook up with this guy on LinkedIn. He's doing all this, he's hooking up with these people. But really, honestly, I didn't remember a lot of the, you know, it just had gone by. But the key takeaway for me really was, look, just fucking do it. Just go and start something and then see where it goes, which sounds like is what your story is. So firstly, I wanted to make sure that you really understand, I'm not just blowing smoke. I didn't want you to just get you to come and sit down and do an interview with us. I wanted a moment to say thanks, and I think that it gave me the push at least to start. And then he's been amazing because he pushes me every day to keep going. You know, sometimes I'm a bit of a magpie and I'm like, let's go do this thing. And he's like, no man, we got an episode to get out or whatever. So thanks for that. And I think today, you know, I was hoping we could get one more piece of sage wisdom somehow. We're at a crossroads, kind of. Like we're building content. It's not epic, but it's getting better every episode.
We learn a lot each time.
Yeah, you know, he's doing all the technical and the editing. I kind of do all the talking.
In case you hadn't
Like
noticed.
constantly, I don't let him say anything. And then, you know, we have a ton of surgeon connections just from our time in that industry. The most important thing I think that I would want to tell you is we're having a lot of fun.
Good, most important.
You know, I'd rather do this than any of the other. And I've got my finger in a few pies now. So I mean, you know, I have a device company as well, and a couple other bits and pieces. But this is what I want to do. Right, we want to build. Medical Media is the name of our company. We want to build a media company. Probably take you down. I don't know where it ends.
Let's do it. By the way, there's enough room at the top. And in my career, just some other sage advice. You can build your own tall building. You don't have to pull down other people's, right?
That's very good advice. So I think for us now, these are the two key things that I wanted to ask you about today. One is, how do we drive more? How do we gain more reach? So all we do with this is we post it up on our website. We've gone to a couple of orthopedic conferences who've been kind enough to have us along, and we put it on LinkedIn. So that's question one. And then question two would be, do you have any sort of key advice about the monetization? So we have just taken our first sponsor for the AAOS episodes only, is 5 episodes, I think.
Awesome, congratulations.
Which is great, but we're not sure if sponsorship's really what we want to do, because what's nice right now is we can just talk to people and they can say any message and no one's going, well, you know, I know they're going to say they love the Arthrex widget because, you know, Arthrex is the sponsor or whatever. Arthrex, if you're listening, go ahead and we'll take a sponsorship.
I'm a fan of Arthrex, by the way.
Yeah,
Arthrex,
yeah. So that's my questions really. Is any advice on sort of different revenue streams that maybe we're not thinking about, and then how to drive more, because reach is going to be the most important thing for us right now, because we're still very small.
So is it only audio right now that you're putting out?
Only audio.
Yeah, so the first thing I would do is I would probably do this. and inexpensive. Don't go over the top. Even that's too expensive. You can go out and get an $800 camera and just video what that's going on. Because while you've both got lovely voices, really, but let people see you so they can become closer and more personal.
Even let them see Micah?
Yeah, there's a look for everybody.
Okay.
Right?
There's some sick people out there.
But the point is you've got a number of senses you have to handle, right? You got the audio, you got the visual, and you can get an inexpensive. You need a way to tease people in, and if you, Nikki, you can tell me, can I off of a 4K? Can I get a screen grab and it's as good as a photo?
Even 1080.
Even 1080. So what you can do is you can get screen grabs, and I didn't get a chance to go to your LinkedIn page, but you need to put little 30-second teasers.
Oh yeah, there's nothing.
So you need to put a little 30-second teaser that refers back to the long version. Okay, that's really important. And I would put all these up on YouTube. YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world behind Google. So I would put them up on there, and I would start my YouTube channel, because listen, people are going to want to watch you. And I know I work out, and I don't watch YouTube, but I listen to YouTube. So I would want to put and wrap a visual around you, but I would totally, every time I put out a podcast, I would probably clip out 4 or 5 20-second great sound bites and put that up live on LinkedIn, as well as, hey, met with, Dr. So-and-so today, and check it out, we talked about this long version here with a connect to wherever you have it on iTunes and also YouTube, let them watch you, and then the little 20-second clip gives them a dynamic thing to engage with and be like, oh, that's cool. Now, if you do 4 of those, you can pimp the show 4 times that week with a different clip, so it's entertaining and engaging. You got that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would do that, and then I wouldn't worry about monetization yet. Because what you're looking for is sponsorship, and I had this conversation with Icky. We're gonna have a big van, actually like a fucking 18-wheeler at the JP Morgan next year, and we were talking about getting it wrapped and selling sponsorship on the side. I'm like, no, I don't want to be indebted to anybody. I don't want somebody saying, you dropped the F-bomb, Joe, on my show and we're sponsoring it, yeah? And so for the $500 somebody might give me, I'm like, if I can't be me on this show, then it's not worth the $500. We could probably find $500 somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And then if you're for somebody, you're always against somebody in medical device. And so,
good point.
So I would be really hesitant right now on making the monetization of this the obvious one of show sponsorship.
Right.
That would be my feel.
I think that's good. I think we've been kind of falling there anyway, but that's right. That's about it. What other questions have you got for Joe Mullings? Well, you got 2 minutes of his time.
No, I
We've
think
got a little more than that if you want.
I think we're good.
Yeah, Joe, it's good.
Yeah,
it's really
listen,
good stuff.
Bravo to you guys for just going and going hard. I would when you talked about how do you increase your reach. Ortho's a very wide industry, and I know you want to appeal to surgeons, and that's cool. Who else in orthopedics? How about the companies that service orthopedics, and forget about the orthopedic implant companies. How about the adjacent technologies in the ortho suite, the imaging systems, right? What happens? And you scrubbed. What other device companies or technologies are in that ortho suite? Do you know how many startup companies are begging to have a voice with surgeons in it? Pristine Surgical's here today, who I spent the last 2 days with. They would sit in on your podcast in a heartbeat. Now you start to get device companies coming to you, and you become the gateway to orthopedics, not the gateway to the surgeons. So I would do that as well.
It's funny you say that. So
many
we're
people have said this.
right. We get. I don't know why we. I mean, surgeons just because it was natural and we've got that connection, and I've spent my whole career, talking
Great,
with
it
these
was
guys.
familiar to you.
Yeah, it was familiar, comfortable. Maybe too comfortable, and I think we keep getting that feedback from people that are like all the people writing to us and saying, "Hey, this is good stuff," tend to be industry, not a surgeon, which I think is a message. they're telling us.
There's a ton of startups that would look for the ability. Now, what you would do too is do what we do. Is when I interview clients, like I'm going to offer it today. I've got Icky here with our gear. I'm going to be like, listen, I'm going to send you the file. Do what you want with it.
Yeah.
Right? And they'd love to get coverage. They've got a LinkedIn page with 42 followers. You know, and you've got maybe thousands. I don't know. And so, you know, they appear on yours, and it's in front of how many, you know, orthopods. So, yeah, I would just go after everybody who services the industry, and your goal should become the gateway for the orthopedic industry, surgeons included, not exclusively.
Well, please keep doing what you're doing. I know you are. That's a silly statement, but keep inspiring us, me especially, but you know everybody that's in the industry watching what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, it's what we've discovered is a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes I feel like writing on LinkedIn to say, hey, you know what, assholes, like we're doing this shit for free for you, right? So say thank you. So thank you for doing what you do, and I look forward to sitting down with you next year.
Let's do it.
And showing you.
And if you ever get
where
down
we're
to
at.
Florida, you should come in studio, and we can spend some time in there. I don't know if you ever get down.
We're there in March, end of March.
Where?
Orlando.
Oh shit, we're going to be in Orlando at AOS, right?
Yeah, we're at AOS.
Yeah, so if you want to come down the road a little bit more, 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours, come in studio and spend some time. And what we can do is we can call huge attention to you guys.
Are you serious?
Oh,
You would do that?
Of course, come on in and we'll do a podcast about guys who started a
Love it.
podcast. And because look, we're about inspiration, entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
med tech, orthopedics. Both of you guys check those boxes. You like, again, like I said earlier, you didn't be like, hey Joe, tell me how to do this, and then you went away and went home and sat on the couch, watched Heckle and Jekyll, and jerked yourself off for a couple of days.
Well, I did that too.
That too, but at least you did right?
Okay.
And so you went out and did it, right? I love that, and then you're going to be an inspiration to somebody else, and that's really the responsibility we have, is to create inspirational activity for others to be like, why not me? Why can't I go do this? And I think you guys are doing that, and you should absolutely, you have a responsibility to continue to grow.
Right.
Do our best.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you so
And you're
much.
back.
This poor guy he sat here and did this whole thing, had his wisdom teeth pulled 3 days ago, had an infection, had
Do you have
antibiotics.
any
So
pain meds I can have?
They're in the code. They're in the code.
something I can sell you.
Our next episode is about opioid addiction.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Joe,
Awesome,
great
guys.
stuff.
Thank
You know,
you.
you got a busy few days ahead of you, I'm sure. Well, busy.
Yeah,
year.
we're today we've got my next one's at when at 10:30. I got to call Todd.
Yeah. And we're glad you're alive. Because I saw that video and was like, holy shit, I wouldn't do that. That was pretty
you had to
intense.
see how it was rigged up. It wasn't even a legit harness. It was clipped to the back,
Yeah.
and you guys went to like Target and got some rope and some.
It's
and
funny, you know, the best part of that show, that episode, wasn't what you guys were doing. It was that you showed the guys on the ground who were all going, oh, what's, you know,
Right.
are they going to live? You know, they were watching you fly by, and
Exactly.
that was pretty cool seeing their reactions.
Yeah, and that's what he calls breaking down the fourth wall, is showing everything going on behind. And so Dragonfly has its own platform as well. It has Twitter, it has LinkedIn, it has Facebook, it has Instagram. And so what we're doing is we're creating awareness around the team.
Yeah.
And like what actually goes on to make this shit happen. And so that I think is as interesting, especially to like analytical, you know, curious minds, as watching a show.